Hey everyone, welcome back to White Sparrow Living, Luke 12:6. I'm Wendy and I'm so happy you're here. If this is your first time stopping by, welcome, and I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below, as well as the little bell right next to it so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. Today I'm doing a collab with my good friend Kat over at According to Kat, but I'll give you more information on that in just a bit. So first, sit back, relax, and enjoy some fun Christmas DIYs. For this Dollar Tree DIY, we're going to be using 4 of the red plastic bowls and a pack of the condiment cups, 2 plastic shower curtain rings, some black and red gingham ribbon and some twisted poly rope, some Christmas greenery, and you could use one of these buffalo check bows that are already made that Dollar Tree has, but I opted for this buffalo check ribbon from Walmart for $3.98, and then some Rust-Oleum metallic finish chrome paint. So the first thing I'm going to do is spray paint my condiment cups with this chrome paint, and then I'm also going to be spray painting 2 of the shower curtain rings. And to do that, I used some Dollar Tree wire and just made a little shepherd's hook and stuck that into my styrofoam that's in my handy dandy paint station that Michael J made for me. And it's on a Lazy Susan, so I can get the front, sides, back, all over, and it's so much easier and saves a lot of time. So now I'm going to take my E6000 and I'm going to make a dotted line around the rims of these bowls. And these are the perfect ones to use because they've got a little lip, so there's something to grab onto when you place these on top of each other, and they'll stay nice and secure. So now to cover up that outside seam, I'm going to take my gingham ribbon, and I'm so excited to find all the fun new ribbons that Dollar Tree carries now. So every time I see some, I just kind of snatch it up, but I do leave some for others so that they have some too. So I'm just going to take my hot glue and run it around that seam and then place my ribbon right in the middle so that I can then take the top and the bottom and hot glue that to the upper and lower part of that rim. And then I'm going to take my poly rope and attach that using hot glue on the top and bottom just to give it a cleaner finish. So once I get to the end of my rope, I didn't mean that at all, but once I get to the end, I'm going to cut it off kind of at an angle and hot glue that down. And then I'm using my makeup spatula that a sweet viewer sent me, but a lot of people have been asking me about that. And when they do have them in stock, they're usually either in the makeup area or in the bath and body area. So now I'm just going to attach the top of my ornament using that same alternating method, using the E6000 and the hot glue, and then it's time to make our bows. So I'm going to be making 2 of them, and I'm using the twisting method where you just go back and forth, and every time you pass your thumb and your forefinger, you're going to twist the ribbon and hold it in place. And then I'm going to be making each of those loops a little bit larger each time I pass by. And then when you get to the end, you're going to take that top loop and fold that over and then feed your chenille stem right through that middle loop and in between your second and third finger, and then twist it in the back, fluff it out, and then give it a dovetail at the edge. So now I'm going to take a couple of these picks and I'm going to pull off the pine needles or the pine stem part. I don't know, I think this is pine. Anyway, I like the looks of those, and for this project I think it worked perfectly. And then I'll take a little bit of the regular, see, I don't know what kind that is, but we're just mixing up the prickly ones with the softer ones. So I'm just gonna attach those together by twisting the stems so that they're joined together, and then I'll hot glue that on the top of one of my ornaments, and then I'm gonna take my bow and feed the chenille stem in through where I twisted those together, use some more hot glue to make sure that it's nice and secure and in place, and then I'm gonna take some berries and just add to it and make it all Christmassy and pretty, some pine cones. And then I'm going to take my shower ring and hot glue that right to the top of my bow. And then on my second ornament, I'm going to make that bow a little bit smaller, do the same thing with the pine needles and attach that to the side because I want this ornament to be laying on its side. So I'm going to attach my shower ring to the top directly onto the condiment cup. And here they are all finished, and I think these are so cutie patootie. I love that they're oversized and fun. I wanted to make a project where you didn't have to do any painting, and these were already a fun Christmas red color. So if you didn't like them this bright, you could tone it down and go ahead and paint them to whatever color is in your decor. Add some coordinating ribbon for the bows, and no matter how you decorate it, it's gonna be adorable. So I love how they turned out, and I hope you like it too. So speaking of fun, this video is in collaboration with my sweet friend Kat over at According to Kat. And she has the most amazing DIYs. She's all about Farmhouse. She throws in some boho. She is on it for the Christmas season, I'll tell you that. She's got a nice long 21 project video. So after you're done here, go check her out. I'll have her linked in the description box below, as well as the end screen. I'm gonna have her channel linked there too. So all you have to do is press the button and you're there. So now for our next DIY, we're going to be using the 3 different kinds of ribbon and a Christmas sign, and then 2 of these wire cooling racks. And so what I'm going to do is take my big ugly shears and cut these down. Michael J walked by and told me I didn't need to use these and that you can actually use your wire cutters to cut these down. But I'm just going to cut these into shapes of Christmas trees in different shapes and sizes. And so I'm going to gradually get skinnier towards the top, and then I'm going to have a total of 5 of them. You guys know I like to eyeball everything, and so it was a little bit hard to get the sides even when I was cutting because my eyeballs didn't work out that way. So if you need to measure them, that'll ensure that you get equal sides and your tree's not all wonky. So now I'm going to take them outside and use my flat white spray paint and just spray all of my trees. So I ended up changing my mind on a couple of things for this project, but you guys know I always do that, so it's nothing new. But I will show you how it turned out before I changed it up a little. So I had originally wanted all of my trees to be white, but once I got them onto my little stand, you couldn't really tell the difference and it all looked jumbled together. So I'll deal with that later. So now we're going to be making a little bow for each of the tops of my Christmas tree, and I keep my scrap chenille stems in a little drawer so that I can reach for those if I'm making something small. So don't throw your extras away because that will come in handy at some point, especially for sweet little bows like this. So all I'm going to do is fold my ribbon over in thirds and then scrunch it in the middle and wrap a little chenille stem right around it and twist it in the back. So now to paint my base, I'm going to be using my Waverly chalk paint in crimson, and I'm going to give this 2 coats so that it's completely covered and you can't see any of the words or pattern. And then I'm going to take some Dollar Tree beads, and I pulled out all of the red ones, but they weren't quite the right red, so I wanted them to match my base. So I'm going to put those on a skewer and paint those red as well. Now I'm going to take my little pokey tool that I get from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to poke little holes in the places that I want to place my trees. And this wood is really thin, so it was easy to poke these holes. And I just kind of staggered them so that there would be some in front and some in the back. So now I'm just going to use my wire cutters to cut off that bottom portion, and it'll go straight into the hole. And then these worked out perfectly because they had little stoppers from the sidebars or crossbars of the cooling rack. So they went in and stopped at that point. So I made some a little bit taller, some a little shorter, and some a little wider, and just poked them in different places, and I put my largest one in the back. The holes were actually tight enough to keep these in place and they wouldn't be wiggling around, but I am going to use some floral foam just to make sure they stay upright. So as soon as I had put them into place, I realized that the all white trees were all wrong. So I tried to remedy that by pulling them and making them topsy-turvy, but I'm going to end up changing that too. So then I'm going to place all of my bows at the top of my trees, and then I'm going to start adding my beads here and there, and I'm just placing them temporarily before I glue them so that I can get the placement right, and you'll be able to see those little ornaments, and they're evenly dispersed throughout the whole piece. And then to glue the beads on, I just put a little dot of glue onto the bar, and then I'm going to put my bead on, and I'm going to push it up as far as I can when I'm sliding it on so that it doesn't hit the glue, and then I'll let it drop down into the glue so that it stays in place, if that makes sense. So originally I was going to use the bottom of this ornament to be the sign for my base, and it was looking kind of retro, and I thought this matched really well, but it had the 2 holes at the top. So I took a couple of red berries and hot glued those to cover the holes, and I thought it would be cute because it would kind of match the beads that were on the tree that we're using as ornaments. And so I do glue this on, and I decided I just didn't like it, but I'll change that in a minute too. So I decided that having the bended trees look like television antennas from back in the day. So I put those back straight, and then as I'm looking at it, it's still pretty cute, but I decided to take my chalk paint and make different greens with my Waverly chalk paint in moss, and I added a little black to it. And then I'm going to use the moss just straight out of the jar. And then I painted a couple of the trees using scallion, which is kind of a lime green. And then I left 2 of them white, and I think it looks way better. So then I decided to change the sign out. So I used an ornament that said joy, but because it was in the black and red buffalo check, it didn't show up very well against my red base. So I decided to change that out too, and I had some black and white gingham fabric. And so using my Cricut spatula, I'm going to pull that fabric off and then use that as a template to cut out the letters from my black and white gingham. And then to make sure everything's color coordinated, I'm going to take my Waverly chalk paint in white and paint my joy sign and a little bit on the back too, so that none of the brown is showing. And then I'll use a glue stick to apply my fabric onto my sign. And here it is, finally finished, and I think it turned out adorable. I love the fun colors and just the simplicity of the trees. It kind of reminds me of an old-fashioned abacus. So, I don't know, I just think it's super fun, and fun is what this video is all about. So, I hope you guys like it. For our next DIY, we're going to be using a couple of these long, tall boxes. I think these are like for wine, but one is a little bit smaller than the other, so 2 of those. And then one of these craft boxes from the Crafter's Square. And then I just had this tin from some rolled wafers, and you know I don't throw anything away. And then I'm going to be using some poly rope. I don't use the foam scatter, some dowels, a couple of styrofoam balls, 2 of these Halloween axes, and I got these because they have the little balls at one end, some red berries, a foam snowflake, and then at Hobby Lobby I found this faux fur in white, and that was $3.49. So we're going to be using that. But if you don't have this, you could totally use either a chamois from the Dollar Tree or even the mop heads that are the fluffy white. So I'm going to be making a little Nutcracker toy soldier guy, and so I had to plan out ahead of time where my colors were going to be because this is pretty paint intensive. So I'm going to start out by painting all of my white items, and I'm using my Waverly chalk paint in white, and so I'm going to paint both of my boxes completely white, including the tops, and I gave them 2 coats each. And then I'm also going to paint the top of my craft box, which is actually going to be his drum. Then I'm going to start painting my red items, and so I'm going to use my utility knife and cut apart the top part of this little axe and use these as the arms for our toy soldier. And so I just cut that off, and then I'm going to paint it completely red, and this is Waverly chalk paint in crimson again. And I think this is such a pretty red, but it did take a few coats. Actually, I think I did 3 coats on the arms because it was the blue to start with, so that was a little harder to cover. But then I'm going to paint my wafer tin completely red. That took a couple of coats. And then I'm going to paint the balls at the end of the axe handles, and those are going to be his little epaulets. So I really have to kind of skip around here because there was a lot of paint dry time involved. So what's going to happen is I'm going to have the smaller one on top of the larger box, and then using my Waverly chalk paint in plaster, I added a little bit of hazelnut and made that his face. And then I'm going to add some crimson towards the bottom, and that'll be the bottom of his jacket. And then I'm going to go all the way around, and also a little bit on the top, because where you stack the smaller one on top of the larger one, there's a little bit peeking out, so we want that all to be completely red as well. So now I'm going to use some painter's tape to kind of be my guide and show me where to make the red lines for the front part of his uniform. So I put 2 pieces about 7 inches apart, and then 2 pieces right in the middle, so that these will be like his, they're not suspenders, but just something resembling a uniform. And so I'm going to paint all of that crimson, and then that'll leave the covered areas in white. So now I'm going to take my black paint pen, and I'm going to make 2 long lines, and you can't see it in the video, but I have a little piece of skinny tape running down right in between. So that's helping to guide my pen. And I'm going to make these his legs, so his uniform pants are white and then his boots are black. And originally I was going to stop right here and just do the boots part way around, but I decided to change that, and I'll add it all the way around in just a minute. So now I'm going to take my crimson again, and I'm going to paint the outside part of my drum. I'm trying to really go through these clips super fast because there is a lot of painting involved here. So now I'm going to take my dowel and cut that down about 3 inches, and then I'll take 2 of those berries, cut a slit in the top so that these now become our little drumsticks. And then I'm going to use some gold paint by Folk Art, and I'm going to paint my drumsticks and then the outside rim of the lid of my craft box and the bottom part of my drum. So now I'm going to take that same gold paint and just draw a line right at the top of his boots. And then I'm going to take the handle of my paintbrush and dip it into my paint and make little buttons on his boots. And this is where I decided I want his boots to go all the way around the entire box, so it doesn't look like he has saggy drawers. So now I'm going to take my red paint pen and I'm going to make little swirlies all the way down his little uniform, and I'm just doing some S's and then I'm going to add some dots just to give it some added cuteness. So now I'm going to make the signature mouth of a Nutcracker, which is kind of creepy because it's just a square with some rounded teeth in there. So when I first did this, I didn't like it because it's on the plaster color, so I want them more white. So I'm going to change that up a little bit in a minute. So now I'm going to take that same red paint pen and go through the little grooves of this ball at the top part and just accentuate those lines that are already there. And then I'm going to take my gold paint, now that my red paint is dry, and I'm going to make some V's around the outside of my drum so that it looks like a drum. I had planned to use my gold paint pen for this so that my lines would be straighter and more uniform, but I couldn't find it, but I found it in the meantime. So this is where I was going to use the scatter foam for his hat, but I found these felt snowflakes from Dollar Tree, but it had a silver piece on top, so I'm going to paint that gold so it matches everything. So then I took some of that poly rope and I'm going to hot glue that to the sides of his hat, and then to cover up one side where I did a really bad glue job, I'm going to take some greenery and put that on top. And this is from the ornament that I think we used in the last DIY. So now I'm going to take that foam snowflake and cut off a couple of the tips so that I have his eyeballs, which will be even, because you guys know I'm not a very good cutter when it comes to circles. So in order to make them the same, I just took those tips and hot glued those right under the ledge of where the lid goes onto the box. And then I'm going to take my blue paint pen and make circles on each of those pieces, and I have to wait for that to dry. So in the meantime, I'm going to cut out some of the Dollar Tree car chamois to make his eyebrows. And then I'm going to take my black paint pen, now that my blue is dry, and make circles in the middle of his eyeballs, and then I'll have to wait for that to dry. And then I made 2 lines above it for, I'm not really sure what that's for, but that's what I was seeing on Pinterest when I was looking at faces for Nutcrackers. So now I'm going to take my white paint pen and I covered up all of the red with some chalk paint, and then I'm going to go back in for his teeth in the white. One thing I had totally forgotten to do and had no plan for it was his nose. And even on my drawing, I have no nose, and I don't know why, but I decided to use a little piece of foam from those little puzzle pieces in the toy section. So now I'm going to add his hair, and I had a sweet viewer tell me that I should use my utility knife to cut the inside part of fur whenever you're cutting fur, because it won't shed. And as you see here, it came apart perfectly and it looked like that was the end piece. So now I'm going to hot glue his hair to the top of the box and on the side, and then I'm going to cut another piece to make it go all the way around his head. And then I'll take a little piece and put it at the top so that it looks like he's not got a receding hairline. And then I'll take another scrap piece and use that as his little goatee. So I had actually glued this down along the sides, and that way I couldn't get my box top open. So I do need to pull that off so that we can attach his arms, but I'll figure that out in a second. So now it's time to make his mustache, and I'm just going to cut 2 little pieces out and then hot glue the end together and scrunch it down, and then attach those to where his mustache would go. And he kind of looks like a Lorax here, but it's okay, he's cute. And then I'll attach his nose, and so his face will be done. So now I'm going to take my styrofoam balls, and at the other end of his arms, I'm going to push in and make an indentation into the styrofoam, and then I'll take some hot glue and glue those into place. So now I'm going to take off the lid, and I have to attach his arms, and so I'm going to use my pokey thing and stick a hole in there, and then I'm going to take some wire and wrap it around the top portion of his arms just under the epaulets, and then I'll push that wire into the box, and then using some packing tape I'll tape those down so that they don't come out. So now I'm going to attach his drum, and I'm basically doing the same thing, except this time I'm putting 2 holes inside of the box so that I can wrap my wire in through there and then into his belly button, and do the same thing with the packing tape and the wire. So now I'm going to take gobs and gobs of hot glue and attach his hat to the top of his head, which you won't be able to see. And then I'm going to take his little drumsticks and poke those into his styrofoam hands so that he can play his drum. And then I did end up adding some paper towels into the sides of his hair so that it sticks out like most of the pictures I saw of Nutcrackers. And here he is, all done in all his regalness. And I think this is so cute. It was a lot of work, you guys, but I think he is adorable. I'd like to think he's high end, but no matter what, he's super sweet. He's the Colonel Sanders Lorax of all Nutcrackers. But I think he's cute, so I love him, and I hope you like him too. So I've had a lot of you guys asking to see the grandkids. So here's our mini update, and this is how he feels about Arm Day. This is Connor, if you don't know him already. And then we had a big day for Mr. Carson, who started kindergarten in real life for the first time. And then the whole family and their trip to the pumpkin patch. So for our final DIY, I'm going to be using this clock that I found at the Goodwill, and I got this for $7. I have been finding some really good deals at the Goodwill lately, and so I am going to redo this, and because it was only $7, I love it the way it is. It's actually super pretty. But I'm going to do something for Christmas, and so I'm going to take apart the clock mechanism, and I'm just unscrewing the back screws and taking off the hands. And I learned my lesson from the last time I did a clock DIY, and so this time I wrote down the order in which they were pulled off so that I could put them back on in the correct order. So I'm going to keep all of the little pieces in a small cup so that I don't lose any of them. And then I'm going to use my Waverly chalk paint in white to paint the entire face. And one of the things that I did do is I wanted this to look like wood. So when I did my first coat, I let that completely dry. But then on the second coat, I let it get pretty dry, but then I took my brush and I made some downward strokes the length of the clock so that it would kind of come up and show the bristles, and it really looks like wood when you look at it up close. So now I'm going to be using my Silhouette Cameo 3 to cut out my stencil, and I've had a lot of questions about this, and this is a test piece. So if you push test, you can see if you can weed it easily enough, because if you can't pull that square off real easily and just leave the triangle, you need to adjust your settings. So I'm using a force of 10 and a speed of 5, and I'm using my Frisco Craft stencil tape. I'll have this linked in the description box below, and I'm actually using the super tacky kind, but you want to use medium tack for this project. So I'll also have a coupon code to get a discount. So now I'm going to take a colored pencil in black, and I'm going to make some lines going down the face of my clock, and I'm just eyeballing the distance between each of those lines, and then I'm going to go back in with my finger and rub them out so that they get nice and blurred and it looks like it's shaded, and you did an amazing paint job when it's just your finger and a pencil. So it will get a little hot as you're rubbing because you're rubbing so much, so let your finger cool off every now and then. So now I'm going to take my stencil and I'm going to put, "Oh Come Let Us Adore Him," and I'm using the font called Handsnow, which I got from defont.com. And you can download these fonts for free for personal use, but I really love this font. And it will be available in my Etsy shop, and I'll have it both in the stencil form as well as the adhesive vinyl. So then I'm just going to take my Waverly chalk paint in crimson and dab that on with a Dollar Tree makeup sponge, and I'm going to do it pretty lightly and thin coat so that there's no bleeding. This stencil tape is tacky enough that there shouldn't be any bleeding, but I've had lots of viewers tell me that if you paint it with the color that your surface already is, that will keep it from bleeding for sure. A lot of people have different opinions of when you should pull off your stencil tape, but because we're using chalk paint, it has a tendency to kind of get flaky once it dries. So I like to pull it up while it's wet, which is also very risky because you can get some of the paint on your surface and you'll just have to touch it up if you do. So now I'm going to embellish the top, and I found this super pretty greenery at the Dollar Tree, but this goes really fast, so if you see it, you need to grab it then, because I only had 3 stems, but it was perfect for this project because I didn't need too terribly much. So I'm just going to use my hot glue and attach my stems at the top, and then once I have that base down, I'm going to make a bow to put in the middle, and then I'll add my pine cones and berries and all kinds of fun stuff. So now to give it some sparkly goodness, I'm going to use this Dollar Tree spray glue, and I'm going to spray it all over the entire face of the clock. And then I'm going to take the Dollar Tree glitter, and it's kind of this iridescent color, so it's not real life glitter. Well, I mean, it's not like the real kind of glitter that is all flaky. It's just really soft and just gives it a sparkle that's so pretty. And then I'll put my clock back together in the correct order. And one thing I learned to do is to start it at the 12 o'clock position so that when it moves around, it's going to have the right time at all times. And here it is, all finished, and I probably say this every time, but I think this might be my favorite. I love the colors, I love the font, I love the message. I love everything about this. And if you think about how much was spent here, I think it's a total of $11 or $12. It is a seasonal piece, and so you'll only be able to use it during the holidays, but I think there needs to be Jesus in every nook and cranny of your home. I think this might be the right size for right over my fireplace on the mantle, front and center, but you will definitely remember the reason for the season if you have this in your home. But I love it, and I hope you guys like it too. I hope you enjoyed all of these projects, and if you did, don't forget to give them a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. If you're not already, I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below, as well as the little bell right next to it so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. Don't forget to check out Kat's channel at According to Kat, and be sure to give her some White Sparrow love and let her know that you're there. I hope everyone has a blessed day, and remember to always be the light. Bye!